If you retire at 64 instead of 63, one Medicare rule can quietly save you thousands of dollars, and most people never realize that until it is too late to undo the mistake. Because when most retirees think about Medicare, they think about age 65. They think that is when the important decisions start. But in reality, for a lot of people, the most expensive Medicare decision gets made a full year earlier, when you are 63 or 64, and it happens on your tax return, not on a Medicare form. That is the part nobody explains clearly. A man named Alan learned this the hard way. Alan retired at 63 with a paid-off house, about $740,000 in his traditional IRA, and a decent amount of cash savings. His advisor told him to start moving money out of his IRA early, before required minimum distributions, and before future tax rates got worse. On paper, that sounded smart. So at 63, Alan did a large Roth conversion. Then he sold some appreciated investments to finish a kitchen remodel. He paid the taxes, moved on, and thought he had made a smart retirement move. 2 years later, when he enrolled in Medicare at 65, the surprise showed up. His Part B premium was no longer the standard amount. It had jumped sharply. Then his Part D costs were higher too. Why? Because Medicare was not looking at Alan's income at 65. It was looking backward, and that is the rule that changes everything. Today I'm going to walk you through exactly why retiring at 64 instead of 63 can completely change how this Medicare rule hits you, what the 2-year look back really means, why one extra working year can protect you from a premium shock, and what to do right now depending on whether you are 62, 63, 64, or already close to 65. Here's the rule. Medicare uses something called a 2-year income look back to decide whether you owe higher premiums. That means when you enroll in Medicare, the government usually looks at your tax return from 2 years earlier to decide what you pay for Part B and Part D today. So if you start Medicare in 2026, Medicare often looks at your 2024 tax return. That sounds simple, but this is where retirement timing starts to matter in a huge way. If you retire at 63, then age 63 often becomes one of the most dangerous years in your entire retirement transition. Why? Because it can become the year you do Roth conversions, sell assets, take severance, exercise stock options, receive a final bonus, or make other one-time income decisions. And then Medicare uses that exact year to price your premiums when you hit 65. That is how people get blindsided. They think they are doing smart tax planning. And sometimes they are, but they are doing it in the wrong year. Now let me show you why retiring at 64 instead of 63 can change the entire picture. If you retire at 64, you often keep one more year of employer structure around your income. One more year of payroll withholding. One more year before you start aggressively rearranging retirement accounts. One more year before you begin creating big taxable events in the shadow of Medicare's look-back window. That extra year matters more than most people understand, because many retirees do their cleanup moves right after retirement. They sell old positions, they convert IRA money, they rebalance, they take large withdrawals, they realize capital gains, they cash out deferred compensation, they finally move money the way they've wanted to for years. And if all of that happens in the wrong look-back year, Medicare does not care that it was a one-time move. Medicare only sees the income. That is the trap. Let me make this real with 2 examples. First, imagine Susan retires at 63. In her first full retirement year, she does an $80,000 Roth conversion because she wants to lower future required minimum distributions. She also sells appreciated stock for a $35,000 gain. Her current lifestyle is modest, and by age 65, her actual spending is under control. But Medicare is not pricing her based on how modest her life is at 65. It is pricing her based on that earlier high-income year. So now she lands in a higher premium bracket and pays more every month. Now imagine Susan had worked one more year and retired at 64 instead. She delays the Roth conversion. She spreads it over smaller years after studying the Medicare impact. She postpones the capital gain sale or offsets it more carefully. Same person, same assets, different timing, different Medicare result. That is why this is not just about how much money you make, it is about when you make it. And there is another reason age 64 can be safer than 63. If you are still working at 64, especially with employer coverage, you have more time to coordinate your retirement income strategy before Medicare starts. You can model the look-back year. You can project the modified adjusted gross income that Medicare actually uses. You can decide whether a Roth conversion belongs this year, next year, or split across both. You can avoid stacking too many taxable events into one calendar year. That extra planning runway is incredibly valuable. Most retirees think the dangerous year is 65. Very often, the dangerous year is 63. Now let's talk about what Medicare is actually looking at. The number that matters is generally your modified adjusted gross income from 2 years earlier. If that income crosses certain thresholds, Medicare adds surcharges to your Part B and Part D premiums. Those surcharges are often called IRMAA. That is the acronym a lot of retirees do not learn until after the damage is already done. And the frustrating part is this: crossing one of those thresholds is not always caused by reckless spending or bad planning. Sometimes it is triggered by what looks like smart planning done all at once. A large Roth conversion, a big capital gain, a one-time IRA withdrawal, selling a property, final compensation from work. Even widowhood can create a higher bracket problem later. This is why timing beats instinct in retirement planning. Now, I want to be very direct here. Retiring at 64 is not automatically better than retiring at 63. That is not the lesson. The lesson is that retirement timing changes the tax years Medicare will use against you. If you retire at 63 and create a giant income spike, you may hand Medicare the exact tax return it needs to raise your premiums later. If you retire at 64 and manage that transition year more carefully, you may avoid that premium shock completely. So the real issue is not the age itself. The real issue is whether you understand which year becomes your Medicare look-back year and whether you are accidentally poisoning it with temporary income. That is the phrase I want you to remember. Temporary income, permanent consequences. Because to the retiree, it feels temporary. To Medicare, it is a pricing trigger. Now here is where people get a second surprise. Some retirees actually have a way to reduce those premium surcharges after the fact if the higher income came from a life-changing event like retirement, work stoppage, divorce, death of a spouse, or loss of pension-producing property. In some cases, there is a form that allows you to ask Social Security to reconsider the premium based on your current lower income rather than the old return. And this is where many people leave money on the table. They assume the letter is final. They assume the premium increase cannot be challenged. They assume because the tax return was technically correct, the Medicare premium must also be locked in, not always. That is why if you retire and your income drops sharply, you should not just accept a higher Medicare premium without checking whether you qualify for reconsideration. Now let me give you a practical breakdown by age. If you are 62 right now, your job is simple. Start mapping the next 3 tax years before you retire. Not just your retirement date, your income pattern. Look at bonuses, stock sales, severance, Roth conversions, and large withdrawals before you trigger them. If you are 63 right now, slow down. This may be the single most sensitive year in your transition. Before you convert, sell, liquidate, or rebalance anything significant, ask one question. Will this income still matter 2 years from now when Medicare prices me? If you are 64 right now and planning to retire soon, this is your chance to be strategic. You still have time to smooth income, spread tax moves, and avoid loading too much into one return. If you are already 65 and your premiums jumped, go back and find out why. Was it a Roth conversion, a gain, a severance package, a retirement event? If your income has now fallen, see whether you may qualify to have those premiums reviewed. That is the action plan. And I also want to say something that a lot of people need to hear. This does not mean Roth conversions are bad. This does not mean realizing gains is bad. This does not mean retiring at 63 is bad. It means doing any of those things blindly is bad. The best retirement moves can become expensive when the calendar is wrong. That is the real message here. The reason these premium shocks hurt so much is not just the money, it is the feeling that you were careful, the feeling that you followed good advice, the feeling that you did what responsible people are supposed to do, and then a rule you never saw coming changed the cost of your health care anyway. That is why so many retirees feel blindsided by Medicare. The system does not warn you early enough. So let me give you the simplest possible version of this entire video. If you retire at 63, be extremely careful about creating a high-income year that Medicare will later use against you. If you retire at 64, you may have one more year to control the transition and keep that look-back year cleaner. That 1 year difference can change your premiums, your tax planning, your Roth strategy, and your retirement stress level more than most people realize. 1 year, 1 tax return, 1 Medicare rule, that is all it takes. And if you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. Medicare at 65 is often decided by income at 63. So before you make a big money move in retirement, do not just ask whether it is smart. Ask whether it is smart in that year. Because in retirement, timing is not a detail. Timing is the strategy.